All right, so I want to get everything started relatively on time. And so we might have a couple people join us later. So I'm just going to record this one so they can look back and get any information that they might have missed. How's everybody doing? We didn't really get to have a chat last week. So for the first part of today's class, we can have a broad discussion about two speakers, because we had today's speaker, Catalina Oyong, and last week was Ivana Say. Does anybody have any comments or things that they liked specifically about either speaker, things that they admired, things that they took away from those lectures? And I expect broad level participation today, guys, because we didn't have class last week, so.
Well, from the other speaker, I took screenshots of all like the graphics she showed. I'll have to look back at them because those were really helpful. Again, it was a while ago, but I just remember them being very helpful and like knowing how to market things.
Oh, you're talking about Holly Campbell. That was 2 weeks ago.
Oh, that was 2 weeks ago? Oh my God, shoot.
Yeah, last week was Ivana Say. Ivana Say is in the, has worked at Webster in an adjunct capacity, but primarily works with, is a Ghanaian artist, but was born in the US and creates fashion-centric artwork.
Well, from that, I remember I asked a question about how, like, how does she go out in public and do things? Like, I feel like that's relevant to like, just like photography and stuff. Like whenever I have to go out to take pictures of anything, it makes me so anxious. I liked your advice of like putting on sunglasses and kind of putting on a badass attitude. Like that was kind of a nice advice.
I just as a side anecdote, I had a friend in New York that used to sneak into all of the New York Fashion Week shows, specifically by like wearing a generic lanyard. And she said that you could get in anywhere if you just look like you didn't want to be there. So pro tip, confidence can get you pretty far in those situations, but also just looking horribly bored, because it kind of gives the allure that you're working the event rather than trying to see the event. Anybody else? What about Catalina? I'd been following Catalina's work for a while. My former partner actually collected a couple of her pieces that she made back in St. Louis. Again, I think a really great speaker, relatively on the younger side, just recently graduated from Yale. So I think a really great example for you guys to sort of see the path that you can sort of go down should you choose it. You can get your degrees from Webster, and then should you go the graduate school path, if you can get into one of those programs that is like really well known and sort of carries that clout, there's a lot of galleries that then pay attention to the people that are graduating out of those programs. I'm talking Tyler University, Yale University, RISD, MICA, a lot of those sort of elite East Coast graduate programs. Now, are they crazy expensive? Yes. Are they really hard to get into? Yes, yes. But if you can be one of those lucky students that they want and are willing to sort of fund your education, those big name schools can be worth their weight in gold. I mean, which is not to say that the name alone carries your career. It doesn't, because there are a lot of people that I know that went to Yale have done nothing, and the art world does not care for those people. However, I think Catalina is one of those people that really has the work ethic and sort of the proof behind the pudding, if you will. She puts in the work. She's one of the hardest working contemporary sculptors that I think I've come across. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to invite her to talk to you guys, because like you can see the level of success and really early career recognition that can happen if you're committed to your practice and you really put your nose to the grindstone, but also that you just position yourself in the right area. Now, this is not to say that moving to New York and following this like singular path is for everyone. And we can sort of talk about that more when we go over the reading that I gave you guys and potentially the reading that I'm going to give you guys for next week. Because really, I'm just trying to, we're unpacking what it takes to sort of be a working artist and or designer in the real world with the latter half of this class. Because, you know, like I said, they're letting me teach this class once, and I'm hoping to give you guys the most amount of information that I can give you. So I hope you take it, and I hope you find it useful. Any other reactions to her work? I know a vast majority of you guys aren't necessarily trained sculptors. So I don't know if contemporary sculpture is something that resonates with you guys. What did you guys think of the work? It was kind of very wacky.
I can't remember. Where did she go to school in St. Louis?
She went to undergrad at Washington University.
Okay.
But she also took like, and she didn't say this, I just know this, just for general information. She also took like, you know, a random class here and there at like the community colleges. So not necessarily for a degree seeking program, but just because she was like interested in like learning like a different thing. And community colleges are there to sort of act as like a place where you can learn different media without having to pay the per course fee that is high, you know, a higher price at certain universities. You can sort of like side skirt that and take like a ceramics class at like a community college, and then you're not paying as much for it, but you're still sort of learning those skills.
Yeah, I really liked her work and I was interested in it, but I'm not super familiar with like contemporary sculpture, so I never know how to talk about it. That's like one of my issues is I'm like, I have questions, but I don't even know like what to ask. But I was very interested in her work, and I thought she was a good speaker. I really liked like how she had like references to work, like Pieta, and even just like the chair. She would just like show her work and like, and here's how I like played off this inspiration. I thought that was cool.
Yeah, I think it gives you a direct line into how artists, but also specifically object makers, sort of think through some of their material and decision-making processes. She referred to it as citing a piece or citing an artwork or citing a specific like object reference point. And I love that too. I love that she like included those slides where she was just like, and I was thinking about this thing, because oftentimes it's like when you see the end result, it's like you don't know how she got from point A to point Z, right? And so it's really helpful to sort of have her unpack those layers for you. Now, granted, like a lot of those direct reference points, like we might be able to get there on our own. Like, let's say those like 3-tiered bunk beds that she was talking about, you know, referencing immigration camps in San Francisco. Yeah, we're not necessarily going to look at that piece of artwork and immediately go directly to that reference point. But what we are going to understand is that that is like a bunk sleeping system. We are going to understand that it is made out of metal. We are going to understand that it reads bodily as being cold and uncomfortable. And we're going to see that stacked nature, and we're potentially going to think about corporal punishment because that is what we were familiar with. So I think, again, it's like we're not going to understand the exact reference, but we're going to be able to, from a materials understanding, maybe get somewhere close to what her original intent was. And I think the more you look at art, the more you experience artwork, you start to get a much more refined sense of being able to parse the language of objects. Again, you know, I teach Sculpture 1, so like, I know it's hard from the start, but the more you look at contemporary art, you will be able to have a broader understanding of that language of what materials mean. And I think you guys already have a pretty pretty strong sense of it. But sometimes it just feels good to have somebody break it down for you in slide format, which is why I love visiting artist talks. What else? I mean, you know, she was talking about very high-minded reference points, right? So the Pietà, naming one of her pieces after Duchamp, talking about Courbet. These are like very high-level references that she's making. What do you guys think about sort of using those art historical references in a contemporary body of work? Does it work? Can anybody do that and get away with it? Monica, I see you smirking.
Yeah.
Well, I like seeing stuff like that, but I feel like you really have to know what you're talking about in order to reference it, you know? Like, I don't know, like I've always seen, like, I'm gonna sound really dumb, but there's this one painting and it's like two guys in a park and like this one woman naked, which is laying there. And I remember like learning about that in history class. And it's like, yeah, that's been used so many times. And I like stuff like that for some reason throughout art history. So I think it's cool when like contemporary artists definitely like use like historical aspects and like try to put a spin on it. I don't know. I really like that type of stuff though.
I think you are right. I think it is a thing that like you have to have, you know, you have to have the knowledge to back it up. Mm-hmm. But again, I think it goes into that marination process that she was talking about, you know, so we're seeing that piece in 2020 and 2021, but that piece might have been marinating and she might have been gathering all of the research into what it is to use that as a reference for like a decade. So again, it's like the pieces that we, you know, envision in our minds don't necessarily come to fruition within the same calendar year. Mm-hmm. I know I personally have had like ideas that generate and evolve over time. It's like I knew I wasn't ready to tackle a certain subject at a certain age with the materials and access to studios that I had. I know that there are certain things that I cannot do, you know, when I'm self-funding a project. So I do think that it is important for us to be reminded that like there's work that you can make right now, and then there's work that marinates over time. I also I've never heard anybody refer to it as marination before, but I love that because it's that idea that even if you're not actively working from a making standpoint, but all of the information that you're consuming is actively sort of adding flavor and creating layers of depth to your own practice. So all of the things you're looking at, all of the things you're watching, all of the things that you see each and every day is part of your studio practice. It doesn't always have to be with a brush in hand or, you know, a camera, you know, looking through a camera's lens. It can just simply be like reading poetry. Again, I think that kind of, that broad information consumption, I think makes better contemporary artists. I mean, ever since postmodernism happened, artwork has to be very layered and very self-referential. And so if anything, our job as artists has gotten way harder because, you know, you can't make a reference without knowing everyone else who has also referenced the thing and the original thing and the entire history behind the original thing. So I think artists nowadays, like, you do have to be heavily steeped in a research process as well, which sounds hella boring, but this is why I always tell you guys to sort of chase after the things you're already interested in, because it's the only thing that's going to generate enough gas for you to keep going. What about this idea of sort of like processing not only generational and inherited trauma via being a you know, second generation immigrant, but also being a victim of, you know, sexual violence. Like, what do you guys think about creating artwork that sort of tries to tackle the myriad language that is trauma? Have any of you guys like thought about how to do those things? I know that we can also sort of talk about it in a broad sense, because, you know, there's a lot of artists that are making artwork about generational trauma as it's being passed down, in particular to race, not only being you know, a person of color, but also, you know, the Asian community is going through a lot of trauma right now because there are specific and planned, you know, violent attacks against their community, and there always has been. So, but even, you know, outside of sort of skin color and things like that, you know, there's also what it is to be a woman or perceived as a woman or part of the LGBTQIA community, all of which can carry fear, violence, and trauma. So to broaden it out even more, yeah, I think it's interesting to bring up as a subject. I don't know if any of you guys have anything you want to add to that, or anything that you maybe have read or looked at or thinking about lately. It seems like a relevant thing to bring up just because of the climate we've been in for the past year and a half, forever. I think of all the speakers that we've had this semester, Catalina definitely specifically has a finger on that pulse with her work, which is not to say that some of the other artists didn't. They definitely did, but yeah. What do you guys think?
I think it's interesting because, like, I was always like, I don't, like, I feel like that's a common thing that people go to because it is, you know, heavy on your mind. So I feel like sometimes even unknowingly you like lean towards it, because I was always like, I would see and hear people saying, like, talking about how they've like turned their trauma into art, even if it's just like reflecting, not even like a healing type of way. And I was always like, oh, like that's interesting to me. And then I didn't realize that maybe I was even doing some of that too. So it's like cool to see how people go about that, because it is a big part of some people's lives, and it's like how they channel that.
Well, and it's, I mean, it's also the inherent sort of backing as to why like art therapy exists, right? You know, it is the nature that art has the capacity to potentially help heal trauma, or at the very least guide one through the experience of sort of moving through it. Let's see, Monica says, I feel with creating art to work through trauma is very important for other victims who have a hard time grasping and coping through things, 100%, especially through traumas that are brought on with living as a person of color, LGBTQ, women, etc. It provides representation in a field that has been widely dominated by white men for the majority of its history. Amen. I think it also, you know, potentially one of the things that when we are given the microphone, finally, we sort of want to point at reasons why we had not been given the microphone before. So it's one of those things that, you know, when people of color, people within the queer community, women, it's like when we are given the chance to speak, we want to speak about something that is important to us, and potentially try to undo the injustices that we were subject to for so long. And a large part of that, you know, is speaking out against, like, you know, inequality or inequity within the art system. But yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know, I think the healing capacity is a really important part. It's very inspirational for people who feel overshadowed and can help diverse what is spotlighted in the art world. Yeah, I mean, but it's also part of a larger conversation. I don't even just think it's overshadowed, but the system was built incorrectly or correctly, because it was meant to exclude all of those other voices. And so it's like we have to point that out whenever we get the chance to have our voices heard. And yeah, not sweep sort of generational or contemporary trauma under the rug. When did art stop being just like exclusively about beauty? Largely. Because I feel like pretty art is not necessarily contemporary art. And you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. Or you have an opposite opinion. No. I'm thinking of when artwork was, and obviously I don't want to speak to a completely narrow view of artwork, but traditionally I think anything prior to Dada, oftentimes artwork was primarily, or at least the famous artwork was primarily created by middle-class white men, and there was a general focus on creating objects that are beautifully rendered. So I'm thinking like even, you know, Impressionist paintings or neoclassicism. But I mean, even the macho modernist perspective of allow the paint to purely be paint in its purest form, you know, the Clement Greenberg school of worshiping Jackson Pollock. You know, I think there's some people that were worshiping paint for what paint is. But even so, it's like relatively kind of pretty. I think it's when we get into postmodern and contemporary art that we actually started injecting subject matter back into it. And I think that's when we also brought with it a lot of troubling, often grotesque subject matter and imagery back into the world. Let's see, we got stuff in the chat. I hope that answers your question, Jacob. I feel like it might have started during the Baroque period, but definitely in the last 200 years or so, says Monica, like not being afraid to represent things as they are or finally giving people recognition. Also, the DIY movement helped a lot, moving towards lowbrow mediums and opening things up to more people. I honestly think that is just, you know, moving towards equity and representation. We aren't hearing from one perspective, and that perspective was like, look at this pretty still life, look at this pretty lady, look at this pretty landscape, and now you're actually hearing from like different perspectives, and they're saying, look at that guy over there that's committing a hate crime, and then look at this racism, look at these caricatures that are you know, specifically used to garner resentment towards the Asian community. It's like you're getting the larger perspective because you have multiple people speaking, and so you're getting a more accurate picture of what contemporary life is like, but also sort of that retroactive history. We're finally like rewriting history to where it actually includes, you know, the truth, which, you know, is constantly going to be rewritten, because revisionist history is what we have to do, because the systems are set up that we often aren't telling the whole story. We're just telling one person's version of the story. But, you know, I do think that it is important that we don't just like, you know, put a pin in it and then move on. Let's see, we got Emily says, I feel like some people now who aren't as familiar with the art world and art history often only find value in art that is photorealistic or just beauty. Amen. For example, my dad sees contemporary or abstract art and just says the classic phrase, well, I could have done that. Well, next time your dad says that, you can say, yeah, but you didn't. And also it would mean an entirely different thing if you made it. Because authorship also has, you know, a very strong hold on how we understand artworks today. You know, it's the same reason why I cannot make the same work that Monica creates. I cannot make the same work that Catalina makes. I cannot. You know, they would be like, Emily, why are you making artwork about, you know, what it is to be a Chinese immigrant? And I would be like, you're right. Why would I be doing that? That is not my history to tell. Monica says, I feel like people who may not know a lot about art or art history think that anything that's not unrealistic don't understand what it took to get to this point, so they can't fully appreciate it or the personal growth of an artist. Yeah, I mean, well, I think it's also in the eye. I think it's also in the eye of the beholder. I think there can be beauty in the grotesque. I think there can be beauty in a wide variety of things. And so that then becomes a larger question of like, how do we define what is beautiful? And what is beautiful to a macro culture within the United States is not necessarily going to be every single person's definition. Simultaneously, the westernized concept of beauty is not necessarily going to translate in the same way, sort of globally. So, I'm playing devil's advocate here. I know I'm asking questions that don't have finite answers. But I do think it is at least kind of important to start to think about and get our wheels turning. Because again, I do think that each of you guys has an individual perspective. And so starting to dig into all of those, you know, unique individual things that make your perspective you is going to sort of help you guys as you move forward in your art careers. Again, and from that, we're going to scoot on over to the reading that I gave you guys. I read through this morning just to give myself a refresher and make sure that I know exactly the information that you guys read over, and hopefully can answer any questions. There is a large amount of information in here that is a little bit dated. I'll go ahead and say that. I'm pretty sure some of you guys are probably reading this and just going, what's a slide? What do they mean when they say slide? So this book was written in 2006 and has, again, a lot of really important information. I like to include it because I like the examples of the documents, the written documents, you know, that the author is saying every single artist should have in their arsenal. What did you guys think of this one? Come on, guys, I gave you 2 weeks to read the reading, so hopefully you made notes and have questions and can engage.
I was kind of wondering how this could apply more to what I'm, like the field of work I want to end up in, because like halfway through, I realized this is very like for people who want to get into a gallery, and that's not exactly my top priority.
Okay, so if you could give us specified information about the field that you want to go in. I know a lot of you guys are pursuing graphic design degrees, so.
Yeah, I'm a graphic design major, and I'm looking more into working with businesses and companies that do logos and different like animation type of graphic like that kind of stuff, or like even package design.
So a large part of this would still apply to you, Jade. Cover letter, quite obviously, every single job you ever apply to is going to require a cover letter. And it oftentimes is good to do, you know, they said like, if they use the reference of like, if a gallery only shows a certain type of work and you show an entirely different type of work, don't waste their time, it's rude. So it's similarly with when you're writing cover letters and you're applying to jobs. If you know that their design aesthetic is a very specific way, and you know that the way that you work is not that way, you can still apply to the job, but just be mindful that like they potentially might look at your portfolio or examples of your work and it's not going to be a good match. So just keep that in mind. It's like you can cater each and every single part of your cover letter to fit each job. I cannot tell you how many different cover letters I've written. There's a different, I write a new one every single time. It's a different job. So that still applies. I think the exercise in rediscovering your accomplishments and figuring out how to flesh out your artist bio or your designer bio, I think still is a relevant thing, Jade, since you're starting out. It's like you may not have exhibited at enough places, or you may not have interned at as many places you would want to intern. But you can still find or parse lines that you could supplement and put that experience that would make you seem like an all-around employable, responsible, interesting candidate for a position. So I think that still applies. You know, we obviously, you know, a lot of this has to do with creating like an artist statement. You might not have to do an artist statement, but every job application is different, but oftentimes they do want some type of statement about how you work. So not every job would have that, but some of them might give you specific prompts that you then would want to respond to. But again, it could literally be a different prompt for every single job. So even though you do consider yourself a more commercial designer, I would still think about like what your brand is or how you like to design. I would still go through that exercise and just have that in your back pocket should you ever need it to answer one of those prompts. And then again, the portfolio, everybody has to have a portfolio. So while this is a very specific, concrete packet to send to a gallery, a lot of the information in this chapter in one way or another can translate towards applying to professional opportunities as well.
I was also just curious because when people were talking about putting together their stuff for like portfolio reviews with Webster, some people were like trying to fit graphic design type of things into that, and it was just kind of awkward. So I just like, I don't really know exactly what design people would want to see from a portfolio. Like I know it would be similar, but I don't know if you could find like another reading that's more specific to design, that would be cool.
Let me reach out to Noriko.
Okay.
I feel like Noriko probably has like a killer design centric reading in up her sleeve.
Probably.
Yeah, let me look into that. Two, I think also, Jade, what you're experiencing, you said they were moving sort of graphic design into their portfolio and it looked awkward. A large part of that is just that, you know, you guys are still building portfolios. And there's only enough hours in a day and only enough days in a year. And therefore, like, you know, your portfolios, when you first are building them out, they're going to feel a little bit disjointed at times, because oftentimes you're filling your portfolios with assignments from school rather than like, you know, real world practical examples of work that you've done like professionally. So I think it's one of those things that like it always starts off a little clumsy and it doesn't really flow professionally until you get a little bit more experience and start to swap things out that don't work as well. But yeah, I'll try to find you a design specific example. You may have to bear with me for a little bit because it's not my area of expertise, but I will look. Okay, so we got okay, there's a lot of things. Let me catch up. You guys started popping off in the chat and I lost track. Monica says, I didn't realize how much went into applying into an art gallery. Do art galleries accept a lot of work that deals with design work in regards to mixed media art, text, image art, etc., like poster art, printmaking, silkscreen, digital collages? Monica, every gallery is different, and every gallery usually has a general idea of the artwork that they show. So this is what they were talking about do your research. Like, don't waste your time trying to create a connection with or reaching out to galleries that only deal with ceramics if you are not a ceramicist. It's one of those things, do your research and you will find a place that potentially will be more amenable and friendlier to the specific type of work that you do. So yes, there are galleries that do a lot of poster art, printmaking, silkscreen, collage work. They primarily work in two-dimensional design. There are galleries that literally are designated and devoted to only showing drawings. Now, the definition of drawing can be debatable. There are galleries that, they'll do one two-dimensional show that is, broad reaching every single year, but they also, potentially show small tabletop sculptures. So it's all about looking at the gallery website, seeing what work they've shown in the past, and sort of deciding individually as to whether or not your work can fall within that. Again, same thing professionally. If you are looking at companies to potentially work on their design team, you aren't going to want to choose a place that is completely antithetical to your design aesthetic. It's not going to be a good fit. They're not going to think it's a good fit. You're probably going to be miserable because you probably won't get along with any of your, fellow employees. It's like, do your research. Now, I know from a professional standpoint, beggars can't be choosers, but it will help you out with getting positive responses, both professionally and from a artistic networking standpoint. If you are approaching your people, they will also see you as their people. So if you do the appropriate amount of research, you should have a higher likelihood that they will respond positively. Okay. Liv says, this reading was super hard for me to focus on, so I just skimmed it a few times to take in the important information. But similar to Jade's question, what should be added / removed from an artist packet if you're just using it to apply to design jobs, internships, not for galleries? Because I have no interest in applying to galleries. Well, and also applying to galleries can take different forms now. So I was also going to say this, just cold sending out these packets to galleries is not necessarily going to yield good results. There was a 2-sentence line in this book that said you should call the gallery and ask how they choose new artists. That is actually the best thing to do, because they potentially might have an open call where they only do it for 3 months out of the year, and that's when they receive these packets or applications. And nowadays, most of this stuff is done digitally. It's done all online. Okay, so back to the question. If you are applying to design jobs or internships, again, Liv, read what they're asking for. Anytime, read over the application instructions multiple times and literally write notes what they're asking for, and create a list, because they potentially are asking for, you know, anywhere between 1 to 20 examples of your portfolio work, or they might just ask for a link to your website. So if you don't have a website, then that's going to be a little bit tricky. You know, because you might be applying with like your Instagram page, and that's how you've been documenting, you know, your entire work is through that social media platform. So again, it's like, read what they want and try to give them those things. So obviously, you know, if you're designing, if you're applying to a design job or an internship, they're not necessarily going to want all of the things that were in this packet. And they might want something that is outside of this packet as well. So the biggest piece of advice I can give you guys in this scenario is read carefully what they want and try to follow those instructions to a T. Because sometimes they will be very minute and specific instructions, even down to they'll have you upload images of your portfolio, but they only want them to be titled and saved in a certain format, which is a giant pain in the ass, but you got to do it. Give the people what they want. I think the expansion on the artist bio was helpful. My current artist bio is only about 5 sentences, and I realized after reading this, it doesn't need to be as concise as mine is, and I can expand on it. Yep, exactly. Sydney, since I'm majoring in graphic design too, I never thought about putting work in a gallery, so I didn't realize you need to present so many things like a cover letter, bio, blah, blah, blah. I always thought that you had to just show your work you make and talk about your work. Yeah, Sydney says that she likes that the reading gave examples of written examples of each of the items, so you can look back and reference them. That's one of the specific reasons why I wanted you guys to see this. I know we had a pretty open conversation about what is included or how to tackle the idea of an artist statement, or design statement, or project statement, however you want to put it. To talk about your own work or to talk about your own brand of design. I wanted you guys to see all of the examples that she put in that book, because there's no one correct answer. Really, all that is supposed to do is it's supposed to set a tone for the people who are going to be looking at your work. I think one of the best pieces of advice that they actually gave in this book was, when you have a draft, first of all, write a draft that is too long, because then you have plenty of room to edit shit out. Because trust me, you're going to need to take some stuff out, but also give it to someone else, and then vice versa. And if there are like broad generalizations that, you know, can be like, if you see yourself too much in someone else's artist statement and vice versa, then it means that potentially you guys are writing about your artwork and your practice and how you design too broadly. Because then you're just talking about design in general. Then you're just talking about making in general. You're not talking about how you make or how you design, or the things that are important specifically to your perspective and your point of view. So I think specificity and the emphasis that they put on specificity in some of these documents is really important. Emily says, I wonder how much this would be different if it were written today, especially the photography part, since phone cameras are such high quality now. Do you think phones are an acceptable way to document work? You're not gonna like my answer, Emily. No, I don't. Because even, okay, I'll put it this way. Document it for what?
Well, I used my phone for BFA review, and it seemed fine. But I guess like if it was for a gallery, probably not. But yeah, I kind of use my phone for like everything now, because I just don't have access to a camera.
Oh, 100%. I think using your phone is, well, first of all, we need to just cut through the classist bullshit, which is that not everybody has access to a DSLR camera. So I'll just say this. I'm not going to say what you should or shouldn't do. You're going to do whatever you can do, and that's okay. Now, phones have progressed crazily, and they take really good images of your work. And that's perfect for a large amount of self promotion things, social media, all of that. I think it's a perfect way to document your work. However, when you start to get down to the nitty gritty of applying to if you're trying to be taken on as an artist at a commercial gallery, if you're trying to apply to a really prestigious graduate program or residency or anything like that, in just reading the application, you will see such specific image requirements that you will quickly understand that your file sizes from your phone aren't big enough. They aren't big enough because they aren't high resolution images, which most things that you apply to, galleries, residencies, exhibitions, all of that stuff, they usually are looking for a high resolution image. And it's because if they love your work and they want to, you know, have it in, let's say, a solo show or an exhibition, they want those images to look really good on their website, and they want those images to be able to be translated into promotional materials in print, which means that if it's a big gallery and they want to make a big banner saying like Emily Moeller, you know, Faces of Representation or something, they want to be able to blow that file up huge. So the again, like I said, classist version of all of this is the fact that a large amount of the really prestigious stuff that you would, opportunities that you would want to get, already require high res images, which are those raw files that they were talking about in the book. A raw image on a DSLR camera is big as hell. And, you know, you can compress it down, but again, you don't want to start small and then try to stretch it big, because that interpolation starts to happen. That's where you're making up all of the pixels in between and everything just starts to look real foggy. So, like I said, use what you have until you can get access to other things. But also, I would suggest being creative. Offer to, you know, trade pieces, you know, with your photographer friends. Offer to buy somebody lunch if they will show you how to use a DSLR camera if you don't know how to use one. It's like at this stage in y'all's career, you should be kind of like bartering and working with other people who are also at your same stage but have a different skill set, and you guys are always trying to learn from one another. That, and the other question is, if you were tied to an institution, which you all currently are, you were tied to the art department at Webster, y'all probably can get access to a DSLR camera. I guarantee it. Go to the Hunt office, ask them who you got to talk to. It's probably Robin. They won't let you keep it for an extended period of time, but they will let you check it out for a brief period of time. And then also, it's one of those things that, like, you know, you can reach out to your instructors and see if they would be willing to walk you through and help you document your work. So that's a question I would literally ask all of your instructors, the ones that do 2D, the ones that do, you know, 3D, ask all of them and see what their answers are. And see who can give you the most useful answer. But yeah, for the time being, yeah, on your phone. Most people, I see people that don't even, working successfully in the contemporary art realm today, where they don't even have an artist website and they only use Instagram. So you can get away with it, but it's usually better to cover all of your bases and have like both an artist website and social media pages. Good question. Any other questions about this incredibly dense reading? I know the latter half of it primarily had to do with appropriately photographing work, which is really dense and hard to read, but it does go into a large specific amount of information that does kind of walk you through the process of what it is to use a digital camera appropriately to take pictures of your artwork. So even if you didn't get anything from it now, I would still tag this reading and hold it on your computer for when you do get access to a camera like that, because it kind of in a pretty accurate way walked you through what it is to use that camera as well. All right. Other questions? No other questions today?
I think this was like from a long time ago, but we were talking about graphic design and how like a graphic design majors, like how this can apply more. I remember in my my portfolio class, we were talking about leave behinds. I think that's what they're called. There's probably another name for them, where like you create a little packet, like not a packet, but like an envelope with like prints of your art and stuff to hand to an employer, like after you're done with an interview as a thank you. Or it could just be a personalized thank you note with your work on it to kind of like make you stand out. So like I feel like that could be a part of some kind of artist packet or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, that's one of those things that can like work to your benefit or to your detriment though.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when they were talking about the letterhead in the stationery. It's like unless you are a graphic designer, which y'all are, you know, you don't want to commit yourself to a brand or an aesthetic unless you truly want to present yourself that way. That's like, y'all are graphic designers, so y'all have the like, you know, compounded issue of every single piece of paper you hand to someone is like handing them like a window into like who you are. So business cards, literally any sheet of paper you hand to someone is telling them something about how you design. So it's not to put too much pressure on it, but you know, don't sort of let that ball get past you though. Like I would take the time to sort of carefully map out the aesthetics of what those things look like and what they potentially say. And again, that's where I think crowdsourcing and getting feedback from your peers is going to be really important. Like show them like, okay, here's what the current business card looks like, or here's what the takeaway, you know, packet that I'm going to leave involves. You know, what does this say about this person? And then just sort of like get a pool of information, because to one person it might say one thing, to another person it might say another thing. Again, this is why you also want to do your due diligence to find out what the culture of the companies you are applying to are like. And that's really easy nowadays with the internet, because you can just pull up their Instagram page, pull up what their, you know, most recent campaign looks like, and, you know, decide, do you think that like your aesthetic can fit with theirs? And here's why. Literally try to explain why you fit in with their brand. Lauren, my professor showed some artists who did that. I have examples I can give you. Please send examples. We all like visual aids. Okay, so you guys want graphic design specific content. I am going to do my best to try to track some of that down for you. But again, not a graphic designer, will do my best. And it could also, you know, I'll see what I can find, and then I'll see what Noriko says, because, you know, she's the grand, you know, grand master of all things that are graphic design at Webster. So any other questions about photographing art, questions about you know, artist statements? Now you know, that that version of an artist bio was a long form, full page artist bio that honestly looks a lot like a CV. It's bulleted points. There is that version of a sample artist bio that is essentially a bio mixed with a CV. But there's also like the Jacob, like what you had, that was kind of a brief paragraph sort of telling people about where you're from, where you went to school, and then you know, a small blurb about the artwork that you create. So like I said, these aren't set in stone structures of how to do things, but I did at least want to share them with you and show you the different ways that people can approach them. What else? Anything else? Yes. Lauren, do you have something?
No, I just turned my camera back on. That was all.
Oh, okay. You just like popped up like full screen on my screen.
Really?
So yeah.
No.
Sorry. Oh no, it's okay. I was just making sure you didn't have anything to add. All right, guys. So I'll see if I can track down design specific kits, because I don't think I've ever applied to a graphic design job, because I know that I do not have the skills to apply to those. But I'll look into it. I'll see what it entails, and then hopefully have some more information for you guys. Anything else? Is there any other sort of broad level, real world questions you guys want answered that I can potentially look into for you? Remember, we got, I think 5 weeks left. So we can start to really narrow down the rest of the information that you guys want to squeeze out of this class. Yes, no? Okay. A lot of cameras turned off and microphones turned off this time. I'm hoping you guys are just tired and need a break. And hopefully we get a little bit more engagement next time. Keep in mind, you guys are supposed to be participating and adding to the discussion asynchronously each week. This just allows me to see your notes, especially if you're not speaking up during the discussions. That way I can track your participation in this class. So just make sure you guys, you know, add a little something into those so that I can give you guys full credit. I appreciate you logging in and going to the lectures today. I'm gonna hopefully get something uploaded for you guys to read for next week's discussion. I don't know if it will specifically be the graphic design information that you're looking for, because like I said, that might take me a hot minute. And I'm gonna have to reach out to Noriko about that one. So I don't know if next Friday you will have that information, but you should still look on our Canvas page. There will be something for you to do. There will be something for us to talk about. And as always, I'll also include the link for next week's lecture. And yeah, I hope you guys have a good weekend. We're letting out a little bit early today. Hope you have a good weekend and everything is moving smoothly through the second half of the semester thus far. Okay, guys, you have a good day, and I'll talk to you later.
Thank you.
Bye.